Be Attentive, by the servant of God Luisa, little daughter of the divine will. This book dedicated on the Feast of the Chair of Peter, February 2nd, 2016. Antioch, in Syria, was the city where the first pope of the Catholic Church, St. Peter, set up his chair after his departure from Jerusalem. This was at the house of a noble Gentile Christian named Theophilus, the one to whom St. Luke dedicates his two books, the Third Gospel and the Acts of the Apostles. Nearly 7 years later, in the year 42, St. Peter set up his chair at Rome, at the home of St. Pudens, a senator, and his mother St. Priscilla. St. Peter occupied his chair at Rome for 25 years, from the year 42 to the year 67, when he was crucified for the faith. This book for private use only. Be attentive. Volume 1. I remember that many times after communion he said to me, "You will not be able to truly resemble me other than by means of sufferings. Up until now, I have been together with you. Now I want to leave you alone a little bit, without letting myself be felt. See, up to now I have led you by the hand, instructing you and correcting you in everything, and you have done nothing but follow me. Now I want you to do it by yourself. However, be more attentive than before, thinking that my gaze is fixed on you, though I do not let myself be heard, and that when I return to make myself heard, I will come either to reward you if you have been faithful to me, or to chastise you if you have been ungrateful to me." Volume 1. And you, do you promise to sin no more, and to banish from your heart any shadow of evil that might offend your Creator? And I, yes, with all my heart I promise you. I would die 1,000 times rather than sin again. Never again, never again. And Jesus, and I forgive you, and I apply to your soul the merits of my passion, and I want to wash it in my blood. And as he was saying this, he raised his blessed right hand and pronounced the words of the absolution, exactly like the words that the priest says when he gives absolution. And in the act of doing this, a river of blood poured down from his hand, and my soul was completely inundated by it. After this he said to me, "Come, O daughter, come to make penance for your sins by kissing my wounds." All trembling, I stood up and I kissed his most sacred wounds. And then he said to me, "My daughter, be more vigilant and attentive, because today I give you the grace not to fall ever again into voluntary venial sin." Volume 2, May 12, 1899. Jesus, my dear, it is precisely for this that I want you to pour your bitternesses into me, to be able to relieve you from so many pains. And if I pray you also to spare the creatures, it is because I remember well that on other occasions, after you had chastised the creatures, In seeing them suffer so much from poverty and other things, you too suffered very much. On the other hand, when I have been attentive, and I have prayed you and importuned you to the point of tiring you, so much so that you were pleased to pour it into me, sparing them, afterwards you have been very content about it. Don't you remember? Besides, are they not your images? Volume 3, November 19th, 1899. My daughter, pride corrodes grace. In the hearts of the proud there is nothing but a void, all full of smoke, which produces blindness. Pride does nothing but render oneself an idol, and so the proud soul does not have her God with her. By sin she has tried to destroy him in her heart, and raising an altar within her heart, she places herself on it, and she adores herself. Oh God, what an abominable monster this vice is! It seems to me that if the soul is attentive not to let it enter into herself, she is free of all other vices. But if to her misfortune she lets herself be dominated by it, since it is a monstrous and wicked mother, it will deliver all of its naughty children from her, which are the other sins. Oh Lord, keep it away from me. Volume 3, February 4th, 1900. What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't you know that lack of confidence renders the soul moribund? Thinking that she has to die, she no longer thinks of anything, neither of gaining anything, nor of making it circulate, nor of embellishing herself more, nor of remedying her sicknesses. She thinks of nothing else but that everything is over for her. Oh Lord, I imagine seeing the specter of the lack of confidence, squalid, emaciated, fearful and all trembling, and of all his mastery, with no other ingenuity but fear alone, leads souls to the tomb. But what is more, this spectre does not show himself as an enemy so that the soul may sneer at his fear, but he shows himself as a friend, and infiltrates so sweetly into the soul, that if the soul is not attentive, seeing him as a faithful friend who agonizes with her and even dies together with her, she will hardly be able to free herself from his artificious mastery. Volume 3, February 5th, 1900. My daughter, sometimes the soul feels an encounter in some virtue, and plucking up her strength, the soul overcomes that encounter. And then that virtue becomes more resplendent and rooted in the soul. However, the soul must be very attentive in order to avoid that she herself might provide the little rope to let herself be bound by lack of confidence. And she will do this by always restricting herself within the circle of truth, without ever leaving it, which is the knowledge of her nothingness. Volume 3, February 12th, 1900. The truth is light, which the Word brought upon earth. Just as the sun illuminates, vivifies, and fecundates the earth, so does the light of truth give life and light, and it renders souls fecund with virtue. Even though many clouds obscure this light of truth, which are the iniquities of men, in spite of this, it does not cease to send forth glimmers of vivifying light from behind the clouds, so as to warm souls. And if these clouds are clouds of imperfection and of involuntary defects, this light, piercing them with its heat, makes them vanish, and it penetrates freely into the soul. I understood that the soul must be attentive not to fall even into a shade of voluntary defects, which are those dangerous clouds that prevent the entrance of divine light. Volume 4, April 16th, 1902. My daughter, everything is in repressing the first motions. If the soul is attentive in this, everything will go well. But if she is not, at the first motions which are not repressed, passions will come out and break the divine fortress which surrounds the soul like a hedge, in order to keep her well guarded, and to move away from her the enemies which always try to lay traps for her, and to harm the poor soul. However, if as soon as she perceives it, she enters into herself, humiliates herself, repents, and remedies it with courage, the divine fortress closes again around the soul. If, on the other hand, she does not remedy it, the divine fortress, broken as it is, will let all vices rush in. Therefore, if you want the fortress not to leave you alone even for one instant, be attentive to the first motions, thoughts, and words, which are not upright and holy. Because once the first ones have escaped you, it is no longer the soul that reigns, but rather passions dominate. My daughter, what are you doing? Don't you know that if death surprises you, finding you restless, you would have to get purgatory? In fact, if your mind is not united with mine, if your will is not one with mine, if your desires are not my same desires, by necessity you need a purge to be transformed completely in me. Therefore be attentive, thinking only of remaining united with me, and I will think of the rest. Volume 4, January 5th, 1903. I was outside of myself, and I saw people from our country who, in addition to the words and the calumnies they had spoken, were plotting to come to deeds. In the meantime, I saw blessed Jesus, and I said, Lord, you give too much liberty to these infernal men. Up until now it has been about infernal words, but now they want to reach the point of laying hands on your ministers. Bind them, and have compassion on them, and at the same time defend those who belong to you. And he, Daughter, this freedom is necessary in order to recognize the good and the evil. Know, however, that I am tired of man, so tired that I share it with you. In fact, when you feel that tiredness of this state of victim, and almost the will to go out of it, this comes to you from me. And I warn you to be attentive, not to put your will in, for I am looking for the will of the creature, to lean on it, and chastise the rebels. But let us try. Again I will make you suffer, and they will be left without strength, and will not be able to do anything of what they want. Volume 5, October 30th, 1903. Since I could not see him, my mind continued to raise doubts, and he, making himself seen again, added, "You still do not want to stop it. You want to make my work in you disappear, because by doubting you are not at peace. And since I am the font of peace, as the one who guides you does not see you at peace, you will cause him to doubt that it is not the King of Peace who dwells in you. Now you do not want to be attentive. It is true that I myself do everything in the soul, in such a way that without me she would do nothing. But it is also true that I always leave a thread of will to the soul, so that she too may be able to say, 'I do everything of my own will.' So by being restless, you break this thread of union with me, and you bind my arms in such a way that I am unable to operate in you, waiting for you to put yourself at peace again in order to take the thread of your will again and continue my work." Volume 6, June 15th, 1904. Now, when the soul deals with material things and lets them enter into this little container filled with the divine, something of the divine flows outside of it, and something of matter enters to take its place. What affront the divinity receives, and what harm for the soul! How much attention it takes so as not to let material things enter inside, if by necessity she has to deal with them. You, my daughter, be attentive. Otherwise, if I see anything which is not divine in you, I will not make myself seen any more. Volume 6, September 7th, 1904. My daughter, attention on not committing sin makes up for the sorrow. And even if one were sorry, but in spite of this he committed sins, his sorrow would be vain and fruitless. On the other hand, a continuous attention on not committing sins not only takes the place of sorrow, but pushes grace continuously to help the soul in a special way not to fall into sin, and it maintains the soul always purged. Therefore, continue to be attentive on not offending me even slightly, for this will make up for all the rest. Volume 6, September 13th, 1904. My daughter, when a soul has given me her will, she is no longer free to do what she pleases. Otherwise it would not be a true donation. On the other hand, true donation is to keep one's will sacrificed continuously to the one to whom it had already been given. And this is a martyrdom of continuous attention that the soul makes for God. What would you say of a martyr who today offers himself to suffer any kind of pain, and tomorrow draws back? You would say that he did not have true disposition for martyrdom, and that one day or another he will end up denying his faith. So I say to the soul who does not let me do what I please with her will, but now gives it to me and now draws it back, daughter, you are not disposed to sacrifice and martyr yourself for me, because true martyrdom consists in continuity. You may call yourself resigned, conformed, but not a martyr. And one day or another, you may end up withdrawing from me, reducing everything to a child's game. Therefore be attentive, and leave me full freedom to do with you as I best please. Volume 6, September 4th, 1905. This is precisely why I choose victim souls. Just as divine justice found in me everything it should find in all creatures, and shared with me, altogether, the goods it would have shared with all creatures, in such a way that my humanity contained everything, so do I find everything in the victims, and I share all my goods with them. During the time of my passion, I had my dearest mother, who, while I shared all my pains and all my goods with her, was most attentive as creature, on gathering within herself everything that creatures were to do for me. Therefore in her I found all my satisfaction, and all the gratitude, the thanksgiving, the praise, the reparation, the correspondence, which I was to find in everyone else. Volume 9, October 6, 1909. These are the virtues of true love: to purify everything, to triumph over everything, to reach everything. In fact, what love can there be for a person whom one fears, about whom one doubts, from whom one does not hope for everything? Love would lose the best of its qualities. It is true that even in the saints one can see this, and this shows that in the saints love can be imperfect and can have its variety, according to the state in which they find themselves. In you the thing is very different, since you should be in heaven with me, and you have sacrificed this for love of obedience and of your neighbor. Love has been confirmed in you. The will has been confirmed in not offending me. Therefore your life is like a life that has already passed, and this is why you do not feel the burden of your miseries. So be well attentive on what befits you, and on loving me up to the infinite love. Volume 10, October 19th, 1911. And I. If you knew, oh mamma, what he does to me. He leaves me. He reaches the point of denying sufferings to me in order to chastise. Listen to what he told me the day before yesterday, that he wants to let foreign people come into Italy. How much ruin will they not produce? He really wants to do impertinences, and to make me surrender, he bound me very tightly to his will. And Jesus, are you accusing me? And I, certainly I have to accuse you before Mamma, because she entrusts you to me, recommending that I be well attentive so as not to let you operate chastisements. And she told me even to be daring in order to disarm you. Isn't it true, Mamma? And she, yes, it is true, and I want you to continue on, because grave chastisements have been prepared. Therefore love him very much, for love will sweeten him at least. Volume 10, January 5th, 1912. I am really looking at what you do, whether you shift, whether you change your way. As long as you do not shift, be sure that I keep signing new debts. Your waiting, your tolerance and perseverance provide me with the bill on which I put my signatures. But if you did not do so, first, I would not know where to put my signatures. Second, you would have no document in hand to be able to collect these debts. And if you wanted to be paid, I would answer you frankly, I do not know you. Where are the documents that I am your debtor? You would remain confused. It is true that I make myself the debtor when I deprive one of my presence, of sensible grace. But this, when my wisdom disposes so, and they do not give me the occasion to deprive them of me. But when they do give me the occasion, or when they are not faithful, or do not wait for me after I deprive them of myself, then instead of I becoming their debtor, they are the ones who make themselves the debtors. If I make a debt, I have something from which to pay, and I remain always what I am. But if you do it, how will you pay me? Therefore be attentive, at your place, in your state of victim, in whatever way I keep you, if you want to make me your debtor. Volume 10, February 2nd, 1912. My daughter, the first thing I want is union of wills. She must give herself prey to my will. She must be the amusement of my volition. I will be very attentive on looking at whether everything she does is connected to my will, especially if it is voluntary. In fact, I will not take into account things which are not voluntary, to the point that, when she tells me that she wants to be my victim, I will consider it as not said. Volume 11, March 13th, 1912. My daughter, the baptism at birth is by water. It has the virtue to purify, but not to take away tendencies and passions. On the other hand, the baptism of victim is baptism by fire. Therefore it has not only the virtue to purify, but also to consume any passion and evil tendencies. I myself baptize the soul bit by bit. My thought baptizes the thought of the victim's soul. My heartbeat baptizes her heartbeat. My desire, her desire, and so on. This baptism is done between myself and the soul, according to whether she gives herself to me without ever taking back what she gave me. This is why, my daughter, you do not feel evil tendencies and such. It comes from your state of victim, and I tell you this for your consolation. So tell Father G to be well attentive, for this is the mission of missions, the apostolate of apostolates. I want him always with me, and all intent within me. Volume 11, July 19th, 1912. My daughter, I feel your breath, and I feel refreshed by it. By just being close to you, your breath gives me refreshment. Even when others talk about the things that you said for their own good, I feel your breath through them, and I am pleased. So my relief is repeated, and I say, even through others, my daughter sends me her refreshment, because if she hadn't been attentive in listening to me, she could not have done any good for others. Therefore she is still the one who sends me this good. Volume 11, October 29th, 1914. My daughter, calm down. I am here. To say that I put you out of my heart is an insult that you make to me, when I keep you in the depth of my heart, so tightly that all of my being flows in you, and yours in me. Therefore be attentive, so that nothing of my being which flows within you may escape you, and that each one of your acts may be united with my will, since my will contains completely accomplished acts. One single act of my will is enough to create 1,000 worlds, all perfect and complete. I do not need subsequent acts. One is enough for all. Therefore, in doing the simplest act, united with my will, you will give me a complete act. That is an act of love, of praise, of thanksgiving, of reparation. In sum, you will enclose me completely in this act, or better still, you will enclose me and give myself to me. Volume 11, October 20th, 1916. In the order of grace it happens as in the natural order. The sun gives light to all, yet not everyone enjoys the same effects. However, this is not because of the sun, but because of creatures. One uses the light of the sun in order to work, to be industrious, to learn, to appreciate things. This one makes herself rich. She establishes herself, and does not go begging for bread from others. Someone else, then, keeps lazing about. She does not want to get involved in anything. The light of the sun inundates her everywhere, but for her it is useless. She wants to do nothing with it. This one is poor and sickly, because sloth produces many evils, physical and moral, and if she feels hungry, she needs to beg for someone else's bread. Now, is the light of the sun perhaps responsible for these two? Or does it give more to one and less to the other? Certainly not. The only difference is that one takes advantage of the light in a special way, while the other does not. Now the same happens in the order of grace, which more than light inundates souls. And now it makes itself all voice to call them, voice to instruct them, and to correct them. Now it makes itself fire and burns away from them the things of down here, and with its flames it puts to flight creatures and pleasures from them, and with its burns it forms pains and crosses in order to give to the soul the shape of sanctity it wants from her. Now it makes itself water, and purifies her, embellishes her, and impregnates her completely with grace. But who is attentive on receiving all these flows of grace? Who corresponds to me? Ah, too few. And then some dare to say that to these I give grace for them to make themselves saints, and to others I do not, almost wanting to hold me responsible, while they content themselves with conducting their lives lazing about, as if the light of grace were not there for them. You have reached the end of the Be Attentive series, Volumes 1 through Volume 11. Fiat,